Welcome back to Astro Auto Styling. I'm Lucas, and today we're going to be wrapping this Toyota RAV4. So as usual, before we get started with the wrapping process, let's go over some of the tricky areas or areas on this car that make it different from other cars you might wrap. Let's start with the bumper, and we're going to look at areas that you're probably going to need inlays. One right here, because if we imagine the panel getting pulled around this way, it's going to be hard to lay into here and to also get coverage here without stretching. So we'll probably put one here and on the opposite side here underneath, just so we can get coverage there, and that'll just give us, less tension when we try and pull this across and stretch into there, because stretching into areas is usually not a good idea. This area here might be a little tricky because we have to pull this way, and then also we're going to be getting this surface. And if you look in here, it's hard to tell on camera, but there's kind of a weird spot in here. So maybe if we can do an inlay or something up to here, and then the rest can tuck in no problem. But this area might be problematic. We're going to have to play around with that. Moving along to the side of the vehicle, you'll see we have these guards, and they pretty much go around the entire side of the vehicle. So the reason this makes it different is because typically we would wrap under into the fender and then cut and trim under there. The difference here is, well, you can take these off if you want to, but if we look close enough, if you just press down on them, you'll see the gap that it creates, and that's plenty of space to tuck vinyl in. The only difference here is there's not enough space to cut there and make sure you have enough vinyl to tuck in. You'll be short. So what you should do is, and what I'm going to do is run some tape along here, and then you can cut on this surface without worry of scratching it, and that will give you plenty of vinyl to then, once you press down here, just gently, to tuck into there and make sure you see none of that original paint color. Now, another difference with the RAV4 is you'll see the quarter panel here does not go all the way into the skirt like some cars. It stops. So it comes up here, and also it doesn't even continue on the top. There's another break right here. So that makes it easier to wrap just because it's a much smaller piece. However, we're still going to cut the quarter panel, the two doors, and that piece up top there. We're still going to cut all of that from one roll of vinyl, or from one piece of vinyl, because obviously that top part there is much longer than 60 inches, which is the height of the vinyl. So we need to roll the vinyl out and make sure we have enough to trim that top piece, the two doors, and the quarter panel here. Now, the back is also different because of the bumper situation. So we have all this plastic trim here, which we're not going to wrap because wrap won't stick well to that. But the bumper is basically just this little piece here, right? Then we have our tailgate, but it's separate, right? You can see it's divided there. So it just makes it much easier to wrap because you're working with smaller pieces of vinyl. So as far as wrapping cars go, I think this is a pretty good place to start. The rear bumper is broken up into multiple pieces to help you. The front bumper, yes, that's going to be the biggest piece, but it's a long piece, but it's not very tall. It's pretty short. So again, that makes it easier. It's a Toyota, so disassembly is not going to be incredibly difficult. If you're trying to get into wrapping, I think a car like this is probably a good place to start. And it's an SUV, so it's one of the more common cars that you'll see on the road. Another thing I should mention, especially with the material that we're using today, is that it's directional. So take a look at this. This is KPMF. You can see that gloss in there, that glitter, sparkle. Looks really good. This is red, black, iridescent. As I've stated in my other videos, when you pre-cut your panels, just for increased workflow and speed, you have everything labeled in the correct direction. With this film, this directional film, that has to be the way you do it. If a panel is pointing in the wrong direction, when they're beside each other, it'll look off. It won't be shining the same way. It'll just look weird. So if you're using directional film, which when you buy it on the website, pretty much it'll tell you. Well, it's obvious if you're buying a color shifting one, but also it's good to just treat all films that way, just so it's in your mind. Make sure you label the correct way each panel should be facing. That way, when it's on the car, everything is going in the same direction and it looks perfect. So I'm just finishing up here, but there's one area that I want to show you that I didn't anticipate before I started wrapping. And that is this area right here around the Toyota badge. So if you think about this, I don't know how I didn't realize this, but because we're pulling the bumper this way, there's going to be tension and lines going horizontally. The problem is for an area like this that I have to lay into, if I have lines trying to bridge this gap, I don't want to heat up and just push it in to get this. But other than that area, like I said at the beginning, this is a pretty good car to start with. There wasn't really anything difficult. All the panels are relatively flat. We have that small quarter panel at the back. The rear bumper is pretty much all I have left now. Those two little pieces on the side and the tailgate, actually, trunk. So, yeah, this is, if you're starting to get into wrapping, this is a pretty good vehicle to start with.